Welcome to Life Stories. Today, we bring you a tale of betrayal, revenge, and the ultimate rise of a woman who refused to be broken. When Emily returns from a business trip, she discovers the shocking truth: her fiancé has married her sister in her wedding dress. Betrayed and heartbroken, Emily is left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. But with newfound power, she takes control of her destiny, determined to show the world that even in the face of the deepest betrayal, strength and resilience will always prevail. Subscribe to our channel and let's begin this incredible story today. I had always believed that betrayal was something that came from enemies, not from the people you love the most. But life has a cruel way of proving you wrong. And that day, my world came crashing down around me. It was supposed to be a quiet return from a business trip I had been looking forward to. A few days away from the office. Some time to breathe, to think, but nothing was as it seemed. When I stepped into my apartment, I immediately noticed something was off. It wasn't the kind of thing that could be pinpointed, but the air felt heavy, thick with a fragrance I knew too well: vanilla. My sister Rachel's perfume. My heart began to race as confusion clouded my mind. I was exhausted, but a growing sense of unease drove me forward, and my feet took me towards the bedroom. As I opened the door, I was greeted by an empty closet, and the worst feeling began to sink in. My wedding dress, my beautiful, carefully chosen wedding dress, was gone. It felt as though the floor had been ripped from beneath me. I couldn't even process it. My mind was still reeling, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. But before I could gather my thoughts, my phone rang. It was Samantha, my best friend. Her voice, when she spoke, sounded steady, too steady. I could tell something was wrong the moment I heard her say, "Emily, sit down." I didn't know why she said it, but instinctively, I felt the air go still in my chest. "What's going on?" My throat tightened as I spoke, panic rising within me. There was a long pause on the other end before she spoke again, her words heavy with a kind of gravity that seemed too much for the moment. "Jake and Rachel got married yesterday, in your dress." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I squeezed the phone so tightly in my hand that my knuckles turned white. "What?" I whispered, feeling the heat rush to my face. I could feel the world spinning around me, my mind struggling to catch up with her words. "It's all over social media," she said. "I tried calling you, but your flight was delayed. I thought you knew." I couldn't breathe. How could I have not known? I had been away for just a few days, and in that short time, my fiancé and my sister had conspired against me, had stood at an altar and exchanged vows, had stolen everything that was supposed to be mine: my trust, my heart, my future. I stood there, unable to move, as the realization began to sink in. Jake, the man I had trusted, the man I had planned to marry, had chosen my sister over me. It wasn't just a betrayal of our relationship. It was a betrayal of everything I had built with him, everything I had believed in. And Rachel, my sister, the one person I thought would always have my back, had stolen from me in the most intimate way possible. I opened Instagram with trembling hands. There it was, picture after picture of Rachel in my wedding dress, standing next to Jake. They were laughing, smiling, looking like the perfect couple, oblivious to the devastation they had caused. The caption under one photo read, "When you know it's meant to be, sorry sis. But sometimes love can't wait." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. But it was hollow. It wasn't funny. It wasn't even close to being funny. They had no idea what they had just walked into. They thought they had won. They thought I was broken. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again, pulling me out of my spiraling thoughts. It was Bruno, my mentor. "Deal sealed." The text read, "You now own controlling interest in Monroe Enterprises. Announcement goes public next week. Congratulations." A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Monroe Enterprises, Jake's family company. The same company he had been fighting tooth and nail to save for the past year. And now, it was mine, in a matter of days. I had gone from the woman betrayed by her fiancé and sister to the woman who now held the future of the company they had both relied on. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel any satisfaction at that moment. But there was power now. And with it came something I had never anticipated, the ability to turn the tables. The sense of control was enough to keep me grounded. And a sense of clarity began to seep into my mind. The doorbell rang, snapping me from my thoughts. I opened the door to find Leah, Rachel's best friend. She stood there, guilt written all over her face. I stepped aside to let her in. And she sat on my couch, wringing her hands, looking like she didn't know where to start. "I'm so sorry, Emily," she said quietly. I watched her for a moment, trying to gauge her sincerity. "Tell me everything," I demanded, my voice more controlled than I thought possible. Leah hesitated, but then the truth came spilling out. "It was planned for weeks," she said. "Rachel told Jake you were cheating on him. She even staged fake messages between you and your business partner. When he confronted her, she told him that fate had brought them together, that you were too focused on your career to love him the way he deserved." I clenched my fists, rage boiling inside me, but at the same time, I couldn't help but feel a strange, cold sense of relief. Finally, the pieces of the puzzle were coming together. "There's more," Leah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Rachel took your spare key weeks ago. She wanted to make sure you wouldn't stop her." I inhaled sharply, forcing myself to stay calm. I wasn't that person anymore, the person who screamed and cried. I was different now. I had leverage, and I had power. I was going to use it. "Tonight," Leah added, her voice faltering slightly, "Jake and Rachel are having a celebration dinner at Bella's. I just thought you should know." A smile tugged at the corners of my lips, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Good to know," I said, standing up from the couch. Leah looked at me with a mixture of concern and confusion. "You're not going to do anything reckless, are you?" I smiled, the smile not even pretending to be warm. "Oh, Leah," I said softly, "you should know me better than that. I never play to participate. I play to win." The rest of the evening was a blur of emotions. I couldn't shake the image of Jake and Rachel standing there, hand in hand, as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just torn apart my world. But there was something else, something that stirred beneath the surface of my rage. It was control. I realized, in that instant, that I had more power now than I had ever imagined. Power that I could use to make them both pay. I sat down at my desk, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. But my mind was clearer than it had been in days. I opened my laptop and began to dig. I needed answers, real answers. The kind that would show me how deep this betrayal really ran. And I wasn't about to let my emotions cloud my judgment. If I was going to make them pay, I needed to be smart about it. That's when I found it. The transactions, the files, the evidence of fraud that Jake had been hiding all along. For months, he had been siphoning money from Monroe Enterprises, transferring it into personal accounts under Rachel's name. Accounts she didn't even know existed. I felt a rush of vindication flood through me as I realized what they had done, not just to me, but to the company I had once planned to help lead. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about money, about power, and about revenge. The phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Bruno. "Final paperwork is ready. Once you sign, it's official," he wrote. "We're all set for the announcement next week. The board is already on board." It was a simple message, but to me, it was everything. I was about to take control of Monroe Enterprises. Everything Jake had fought for, everything he had tried to protect, was about to be ripped out of his hands. It wasn't just a business deal. It was a statement, a declaration that I was no longer the woman to be underestimated. I smiled coldly to myself as I thought of Jake. He had no idea what was coming for him. He had no idea that his world was about to come crashing down. Not just professionally, but personally. I opened Instagram once more, scrolling through the endless flood of comments under the picture of Jake and Rachel in my dress. My heart twisted for a moment. But then I felt something shift within me. It wasn't anger anymore, it was strategy. It was clarity. And then, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Samantha, my best friend. She was standing at my doorstep with a look of concern written all over her face. I didn't need to say anything. She could see it in my eyes. She knew what I was thinking. "You're too calm," she said, shaking her head as she stepped inside. "And I don't mean that in a good way." I poured us both a glass of wine, sliding one across the counter to her. "What would you rather I do?" I asked, my voice steady. "Cry? Scream? Throw things?" Samantha hesitated, her eyes searching mine. "I don't know. Maybe just feel something. Something more than whatever this is." I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I feel something." "All right," I said softly, leaning back against the counter. "I feel focused. I feel ready." She studied me, her expression shifting as she realized the depth of what I meant. "You're terrifying when you're like this," she said, a small laugh escaping her lips. But there was a nervous edge to it. I smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile a predator gives before they strike. Later that night, Bruno arrived with the final details. "We need to discuss the gala," he said. "The announcement about your acquisition is set for next week. Everyone important will be there, including Jake's family." I nodded. "Make sure they all receive invitations. Make it impossible for them to refuse." Samantha shook her head. "This isn't just about business, is it? You want them to see you in everything." I gave her a knowing look. Why shouldn't they? The night passed in a haze of quiet contemplation. My plan was beginning to take shape. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just doing this for revenge. I was doing it to show the world, to show them, that I was no longer the victim. I was the one in control now. The next day, I found myself walking into LeBlanc, the upscale restaurant where Jake and Rachel were celebrating their new life together. The maitre d' looked up, surprised to see me. "Do you have a reservation, Miss Monroe?" he asked politely. I smiled. "Table for one," I said smoothly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Heads turned as I made my way to the table, and I saw Rachel's face pale when she spotted me. Jake's jaw tightened, but neither of them said anything. They had no idea what was coming. I took my seat, watching them as I accepted the menu from the waiter. I couldn't help but make the moment last. "I just came for the lamb," I said casually. "It's excellent here, isn't it, Jake? We used to order it every anniversary." Jake's face lost all color. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Neither of them could. One of Jake's business associates offered. "You should join us. We have plenty of room." I smiled politely but shook my head. "That's very kind, but I have some work to review before next week's big announcement," I said. "I'm sure you'll find out soon enough." I took a sip of my wine, letting the silence settle around us. The tension was palpable, but I wasn't done yet. "Oh, and by the way," I added, turning to Jake, "how's the company doing? I heard some interesting things about last quarter's financials." Jake's expression darkened, his lips pressing into a thin line. But I could tell he wasn't prepared for what was coming next. Before he could respond, I patted his cheek lightly, standing up and leaving the table with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You should really pay more attention, darling," I said over my shoulder, my words laced with the venom I had spent days holding back. I left the restaurant with a calmness that surprised even me. Jake and Rachel had clearly been caught off guard, but they were still too blinded by their own guilt to realize that they had walked right into my trap. I could feel the weight of everything shifting now. The sense of power, of control, was something I had never experienced before. But it felt right. It felt like it was meant to be this way. Back in my apartment, I sat at my desk, staring at the screen in front of me. I opened the email from Bruno once more. "Deal sealed," it said. "The acquisition is complete. You now have controlling interest in Monroe Enterprises." A wave of satisfaction rolled through me. Jake's hard work, his family's legacy, the very thing he had fought to protect, was now mine. It wasn't just about business. It was a statement. I had taken everything he'd worked so hard for, and with it, I had reclaimed my own future. The power was intoxicating, but it was also a reminder. A reminder that I wasn't the same person anymore. The person I had been before the betrayal. The woman who trusted without question. Who believed in the goodness of others. That person was gone. What remained was someone who was willing to fight for what was rightfully hers. No matter what the cost. My phone buzzed again, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Leah. Emily, Amelia is freaking out, she wrote. She just got some bank statements for accounts she doesn't recognize. Jake told her it was a banking error. But she doesn't believe him. She's scared. I exhaled slowly. Amelia, I had always thought of her as my sister. My flesh and blood. But what had she done? She had stood by as Jake manipulated her. As he wove his web of lies. She hadn't questioned him. She hadn't fought for me. But now she was scared. Scared of the consequences of her own actions. It wasn't enough to make me feel sorry for her. But it was enough to remind me that no one, not even my sister, was above the consequences of their choices. I picked up the phone. Calling Samantha. She answered on the second ring. What's going on, Emily? She asked, her voice laced with concern. I need you to call Amelia. I said, tell her to keep those bank statements safe. And tell her not to sign anything Jake gives her. I'm handling this, but I need her to cooperate. Samantha hesitated. Are you sure about this? She's your sister. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. She made her choice. Now she has to face the consequences. The truth was, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with Amelia. I couldn't forgive her yet. I wasn't sure I ever could. But I would make sure she faced the consequences of her actions. I wouldn't let her off the hook just because she was my sister. The next day, I met with Cameron, the external auditor for Monroe Enterprises. He had already gathered all the evidence I needed. And his report confirmed what I had suspected all along. Jake had been siphoning millions from the company. Funneling the money into accounts under Amelia's name. She had no idea. This isn't just about betrayal anymore, Cameron said, handing me the file. This is fraud. And Jake is setting Amelia up. If this ever comes to light, he'll blame her. I felt my stomach tighten as the gravity of the situation hit me. Jake wasn't just a liar. He was a criminal, and worse, he was willing to throw Amelia under the bus to save himself. We need to move fast, I said, my voice hardening. The board meeting is this afternoon. I want Jake blindsided. Cameron nodded, a glint of approval in his eyes. I like the way you think. I was done playing games. This wasn't about revenge. It was about something far more important, justice. Jake and Rachel had taken everything from me. But now it was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. Later that afternoon, I walked into the boardroom. My mind focused and clear. Bruno, Christine, and I had spent hours preparing for this moment. And I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. The board members, the executives, the investors, they were all here. But I knew that today, things were going to change. At precisely 3:05 p.m., Jake walked in, confusion written all over his face. His eyes locked onto me, his suspicion growing with every step. What's this about? He sneered, his voice thick with contempt. Bruno stood, his voice unwavering. We're here to discuss the financial concerns within Monroe Enterprises. Jake scoffed. Financial concerns? Please. Cameron entered the room, setting up his laptop. The screen flickered to life. And a few clicks later, the financial records were displayed for everyone to see. The room fell silent. For the past year, Cameron began, millions have been siphoned from the company into private accounts under Amelia Monroe's name. However, upon further investigation, we found that every transaction was authorized by Jake. Gasps rippled through the room. Jake stood abruptly, his face drained of color. This is ridiculous, he stammered. My fiancé wouldn't. I cut him off. You mean your wife? I said smoothly. The one you married in my wedding dress? Jake clenched his fists, his composure slipping as he realized the full extent of what was happening. This is a setup, he shouted. But the evidence was undeniable. Cameron clicked through email after email, showing Jake's digital footprint, proving his guilt. Jake's father, who had remained silent up until now, stood and said, "Is this true, Jake?" Jake had no answer. His face was pale, his mouth dry, and for the first time, I saw the man I had once loved lose everything he had worked for. The board members began to murmur amongst themselves, and I leaned forward, letting the moment hang in the air. "Monroe Enterprises is in crisis," I said, my voice steady. "The only way forward is new leadership." There was a long pause. And then, one by one, the board members raised their hands. The vote was unanimous. "Effective immediately," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "I propose that Jake step down." The security guards moved in, and Jake lunged at me, his face twisted in rage. But they were quick, restraining him before he could reach me. "You think you've won?" he spat. I stood tall, meeting his gaze with a slow, cold smile. "Oh, Jake," I murmured, "I didn't just win, I ended you." They dragged him out of the room, and I exhaled, the weight of the moment finally settling on my shoulders. This was only the beginning. As I walked out of the boardroom, I felt a strange sense of calm. The storm I had been through, betrayal, heartbreak, loss, had finally come to an end, and I had emerged not only unbroken but stronger than ever. I had taken control of my own destiny, something I had once feared to do, too afraid of the consequences. But now, with Monroe Enterprises in my hands and justice served, I felt as though I had found a new purpose. It wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about rebuilding my life, finding the strength to forgive where I could, and walking away from the past that had threatened to define me. Jake and Rachel had their own path to follow now. They would have to face the consequences of their actions. And that was enough for me. As I sat in my office later that evening, the weight of the day finally lifted. I received a message from Leah. "Amelia's made the right decision," she wrote. "She's ready to help others now, in the way she should have helped you." For a moment, I considered my sister, her remorse, her guilt, and the strange place she now found herself in. I hadn't forgiven her, but there was a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could redeem herself. We all had our battles to fight, our mistakes to learn from. Maybe this was hers. I leaned back in my chair, a small smile playing on my lips. The future was wide open, full of possibilities. I had learned so much about myself in this journey, about strength, about resilience, about the power of reclaiming what is rightfully yours. And with that, I knew it was time to move forward. Thank you for reading this story. Don't forget to subscribe to the Life Stories channel for more videos that inspire, teach, and entertain.